The Tivarn dominion was vast, its palace stretching over mountains of gleaming crystal that caught the light of the three suns. The corridors were long and wide, lined with statues of ancestors who had led the empire to glory. Among all the nobles, none was more talked about than Princess Lysera. She was known for her beauty, grace, and intelligence, yet there was a shadow over her reputation. Rumors swirled that she was infertile, that no child would ever bear her name. The nobles whispered about it behind jeweled fans, laughing softly at the supposed misfortune of the princess they were meant to admire. Lysera moved through the palace as if the whispers did not exist, her long, silver hair flowing behind her like liquid moonlight. Her eyes, a deep violet shade, scanned the hallways with quiet amusement. She knew the rumors were meant to humiliate her, but she had learned to smile through the cruelty. No one could tell her how she should feel about herself, and she had grown clever in ways the court did not expect. On a bright morning, the palace buzzed with unusual excitement. A group of young nobles gathered in a private chamber, their laughter sharp and cruel. Among them was Lord Crannies, a distant cousin to the royal family who had always taken pleasure in Lysera's supposed failures. "Send her to the human colonies," Crannies suggested with a smirk, his voice dripping with malice. "Everyone knows humans are primitive. Let's see how she fares among them. It will be amusing to watch her struggle." In truth, she was already planning her next steps. They thought they were sending her to humiliation, but she had learned long ago that intelligence and patience were stronger than mockery. When she was summoned to the Council of Elders, the elders spoke formally, their voices carrying the weight of authority. "Princess Lysera, the council has decided you will travel to the human colony of Arden. This is an opportunity to observe a primitive species and report your findings to the Dominion." Her departure was set for the next cycle of the twin suns, giving her enough time to prepare herself for the journey across light years of space. She did not pack frivolities or indulgences. Instead, she gathered tools of observation, a few personal items, and a small set of human records she had managed to acquire through discreet channels. She wanted to understand this species fully, not as a joke, but as a study. The human colony of Arden was nothing like the palace she had left behind. The buildings were simple, constructed of stone and reinforced polymer. The streets were crowded with humans of various ages and professions, moving quickly, speaking in their loud, expressive tones. Lysera had never seen such raw energy. The humans did not hide their emotions. They laughed, they argued, they displayed courage in ways that were unfamiliar to her rigid, precise upbringing. Commander Elias Kane met her at the landing platform. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a calm confidence that immediately caught her attention. His eyes were sharp but kind, assessing her not as a guest of status, but as a visitor whose presence had to be understood. "Princess Lysera," he said formally, bowing slightly, though his stance was casual. "Welcome to Arden. I hope to learn much during my stay." And more importantly, why did she seem so composed, almost amused by the situation? As she settled into the quarters assigned to her, Lysera observed everything. The humans were efficient in their routines, but also surprisingly resourceful. They repaired machinery with improvised tools, solved problems through collaboration, and communicated in ways that conveyed empathy, humor, and logic all at once. She made careful notes, fascinated by the complexity of this species that was so often dismissed by her people. At the same time, she kept the nobles' joke in mind. She understood that they expected failure, humiliation, or perhaps despair. Instead, she felt excitement. A challenge, a puzzle, and a possibility, something she had not felt in the palace for years. Lysera began attending human gatherings, observing their society. She watched children play in open fields, humans trading in marketplaces, and scientists working tirelessly in small labs to improve their technology. She noted their flaws, of course, recklessness, stubbornness, impatience. But these imperfections did not diminish her fascination. If anything, they made the humans more remarkable. They achieved so much with so little, relying on ingenuity and sheer determination. One evening, she accompanied Elias to a human council meeting. She listened silently as humans debated resource allocation, community safety, and exploratory missions. She had never seen such directness, such honesty in discussion. It reminded her that power did not always reside in wealth or authority, but in collaboration and thought. She began to realize why the Tivarn Dominion had underestimated humans. They judged by appearances, by physical and political strength, not understanding that subtlety and adaptability could be far more effective. Back in her quarters, Lysera began to experiment quietly. She reviewed medical records, comparing human reproductive biology with her own. Centuries of alien science had told her that she could not conceive, but human methods, simple, biological, and natural, offered something her species had overlooked. She began to test theories, small at first, cautious, learning with each experiment. Days turned into weeks, and Lysera continued to observe, learn, and test. The humans gradually accepted her presence. She had a way of blending in without losing her identity, of learning without seeming intrusive. Even Elias, who had initially viewed her as a curiosity, began to respect her intelligence and judgment. He noticed her empathy toward the humans, her ability to understand their strengths and weaknesses, and her willingness to engage in tasks that would have been beneath an alien princess in her own society. One morning, as they walked along a hill overlooking the colony, Elias spoke casually, but his words carried curiosity. "You seem to understand us more than most Tivarn would care to." "Why?" "You're learning, perhaps even appreciating us." She found herself quietly hopeful, the possibility of conception, a concept once impossible, beginning to feel real. She did not tell anyone, not even Elias, for it was a private matter, a personal victory over centuries of doubt imposed upon her. The humans remained unaware of her true intentions, treating her as a guest and ally. Yet Lysera understood that the foundation of trust was growing. They respected her, even if they did not yet fully comprehend her potential. Meanwhile, in the distant Tivarn dominion, the nobles awaited news, expecting stories of failure, humiliation, and perhaps despair. They could not imagine that the princess, sent as a joke, was quietly redefining what was possible. Lysera stood on the balcony of her quarters one night, watching the stars, feeling a connection between herself and the humans she had come to respect. She understood something profound. It was not brute strength or authority that mattered most. It was adaptability, intelligence, and the courage to embrace the unexpected. A faint smile appeared on her face. She had been sent as a joke, but she was not foolish. She would learn, adapt, and perhaps change more than anyone realized. The humans had qualities her people had overlooked, and she intended to explore them fully. And in the quiet of that night, Lysera allowed herself a thought she had never considered before. Perhaps, just perhaps, the impossible could become real. Lysera had settled into the rhythms of human life in Arden, but her mind was never still. Every day brought new observations, new puzzles, and new lessons about the species she had once thought so primitive. Humans were unpredictable in ways alien society did not allow. Yet in their unpredictability, there was ingenuity, compassion, and a quiet strength that fascinated her. She spent mornings in the bustling markets, observing trade and communication. Humans haggled, argued, laughed, and sometimes shouted in frustration, yet almost always, a resolution emerged. Lysera noted how disagreements were handled not with force, but with dialogue, compromise, and a willingness to adapt. It was an unfamiliar method for someone trained in the precision and hierarchy of Tivarn society, but she began to see its elegance. Elias accompanied her on some excursions, though he remained cautious. He had never met anyone like Lysera before. She was an alien princess, yes, but she moved among humans without condescension. She listened, asked questions, and treated each person as intelligent and worthy of respect. For Elias, it was a revelation. Humans had learned to survive through cooperation, but Lysera's ability to observe and understand them almost instantly was extraordinary. One morning, in the colony's modest medical facility, Lysera quietly reviewed human biological records. Her curiosity was not mere academic interest. She was studying the differences and similarities between human and Tivarn physiology. She had been told she could never bear children, yet the humans' natural reproductive methods seemed to suggest possibilities her species had dismissed. The medical team, unaware of her real purpose, welcomed her questions. Lysera asked about genetics, fertility cycles, and cellular regeneration, always careful not to reveal the depth of her understanding. She listened intently as Dr. Mason, the head physician, explained how certain hormones interacted, how environmental factors influenced fertility, and how the human body could sometimes overcome unexpected obstacles. Lysera's violet eyes widened slightly as she processed the information. Perhaps there was a way, a small, careful experiment that could challenge centuries of assumptions, but she would need to be patient. One misstep could alert the humans, or worse, the Tivarn Dominion if news ever leaked. Meanwhile, her bond with Elias grew. He was fascinated by her intelligence and perspective, and she was intrigued by his steadfastness, his calm authority, and his subtle humor. They often walked together after long days, discussing ideas, philosophy, and the human way of life. "You see so much," Elias said one evening, leaning against the balcony railing. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky with streaks of gold and violet. "Do you ever get tired of observing?" "Strength comes in many forms, Commander Kane. Humans survive with creativity, empathy, and courage. It is not always the strongest who endure, but the most adaptable. I am learning more from your people than I ever could have in the palace." Using human data combined with her own knowledge of T-Varn biology, she began testing methods that might allow conception. Each step was slow, precise, and cautious. She understood the stakes. If she failed, no one would know. If she succeeded, the implications would be extraordinary. Days turned into weeks. Lysera carefully integrated herself into human society. She joined community projects, helped with infrastructure repairs, and even assisted in training sessions for human militia volunteers. She learned their tactics, their resilience, and their ability to overcome scarcity with innovation. She began to realize that humans possessed something rare, a combination of determination and morality, of courage and empathy. It was no wonder they had survived against the odds in a galaxy that often underestimated them. Elias noticed her growing interest in human affairs. He began to include her in strategic meetings, asking her opinion on matters of colony defense, resource management, and diplomacy. Lysera contributed with insight that was both alien and astonishingly practical. Humans had always solved problems with instinct and experience, but Lysera brought analytical skill and foresight beyond what they could imagine. One evening, as they reviewed maps of nearby systems, Elias leaned closer. "Your perspective, it's different. You see possibilities others miss." Possibility is often hidden behind what others assume is impossible. I intend to find what others do not see. Lysera was not just a visitor. She was a partner, an ally, and perhaps even more than that, though neither of them acknowledged the thought aloud. Meanwhile, the humans continued their daily routines, unaware that the princess's curiosity extended beyond observation. She was quietly integrating T-Varn science with human knowledge, testing hypotheses, and exploring a realm that even the most advanced T-Varn laboratories had failed to understand. It was not arrogance, it was hope, tempered with patience. One day, she accompanied Dr. Mason on a field trip to gather samples from a nearby ecosystem. The humans marveled at the alien flora and fauna, but Lysera noticed something more subtle. The environment, the genetic diversity, and the natural resilience of these species mirrored the very qualities humans had developed in their society. Adaptation, creativity, and survival were universal traits, and they fascinated her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she walked with Elias back to the colony, carrying samples in her hands. "Humans, like these creatures, thrive because they respond to challenges, not avoid them," she said softly. "They learn, they adapt, they endure. It is admirable. Maybe more than you realize." The idea that she could bear a child, once dismissed as impossible, began to feel plausible. She understood that humans possessed qualities her people had ignored: resilience, empathy, and a capacity to influence biology in subtle ways. As the weeks passed, she noticed subtle changes in herself. Her health remained strong, but there was a sense of anticipation she could not explain. She took note of it, recording everything in her private logs. It was too early to claim success, but hope was no longer forbidden. It was a quiet companion. Elias began to sense her excitement, though he did not press. He trusted her discretion, understanding that the princess's work was delicate and personal. Still, he could not help but admire her courage. To explore the unknown, to challenge centuries of assumption, required bravery beyond what most humans, or T-Varn, could muster. Lysera also learned from humans about relationships, trust, and the strength of emotional bonds. She observed families, friendships, and acts of kindness that had no practical purpose other than care and connection. It was alien to her culture, which prized efficiency and protocol above all, yet she felt its importance deeply. One quiet evening, she sat by the observation window of her quarters, looking at the stars. She realized that humans had shown her something extraordinary. Life was not just about survival, but about the courage to create, to connect, and to hope. Her own purpose was beginning to intertwine with theirs, in ways she could not yet predict. The Tivarn nobles, far away in their palaces, continued to expect failure. They sent messages to Arden, anticipating tales of humiliation. They could not imagine that their joke had inadvertently given the humans a window into a new kind of possibility, a collaboration that might change perceptions forever. Lysera stood on the balcony, gazing at the twin suns as they disappeared beneath the horizon. She thought of the humans below, of Elia's, of the resilience and ingenuity she had witnessed. And she thought of the experiment that had begun quietly in her quarters, small and secret. Perhaps, just perhaps, the impossible could become reality. She smiled, a quiet, determined smile. The joke was far from over, but she intended to write the ending herself. Lysera's days in Arden had become a rhythm of observation, study, and quiet discovery, yet something extraordinary was beginning to stir. The experiments she had been conducting in secret had progressed beyond expectation. The possibility she had once considered impossible now felt tangible, almost real. She could hardly believe it herself, and yet the subtle changes in her body and mind told a story that even centuries of Tivarn science could not dismiss. It began with a sense of awareness she had never experienced. Small, almost imperceptible shifts in energy, in vitality, in focus. Lysera documented everything in meticulous detail, noting patterns and anomalies. Every observation was critical, every variable important. She was determined to proceed carefully, not out of fear of failure, but out of respect for the life she hoped to nurture. Elias, meanwhile, had become her constant companion, though neither fully admitted the depth of their growing bond. He admired her intelligence, her courage, and the way she approached problems with patience and insight. He had learned from her, just as she had learned from humans. He sensed there was something she was withholding, a secret that glimmered behind her violet eyes, but he trusted her implicitly. One afternoon, Lysera requested a private session with Dr. Mason. The human physician, intrigued by her diligence and curiosity, agreed without hesitation. She explained her purpose in vague terms, careful to frame her questions as theoretical inquiries. "Dr. Mason, I am curious about rare anomalies in reproductive biology," she said, her tone calm but urgent. "Have there been instances where unexpected factors, environmental, emotional, or otherwise, led to conception in cases previously deemed impossible?" "Why do you ask?" Over the next several days, Lysera's attention became more focused, her private routines more deliberate. She monitored her health carefully, ensuring that every step was calculated and precise. Her understanding of both human and Tivarn biology allowed her to approach the process with a careful balance of science and intuition. It was during one quiet evening as she walked with Elias through the colony gardens that the first tangible evidence appeared. Lysera had been unusually thoughtful, a faint glow of anticipation in her eyes, and she paused to observe the interplay of light and shadow among the trees. "Princess," Elias said softly, sensing her distraction, "you seem different." "Something is happening, isn't it?" He had learned that Lysera's insight often extended beyond his comprehension, and he had come to respect her judgments implicitly. The confirmation came subtly, a faint physiological change that she detected through her meticulous observations. It was a moment of profound significance. Against all expectations, she realized that conception had occurred. A life had begun within her, bridging the gap between human resilience and Tivarn potential. Lysera allowed herself a quiet moment of wonder, but she did not celebrate. There was work to be done, observations to record, and care to be taken. The life growing inside her was fragile, and she understood that any misstep could have consequences. Yet she also felt an unprecedented sense of hope, hope that defied the expectations of her people and the cruel intentions of the Tivarn nobles who had sent her away as a joke. The following days were filled with careful planning. Lysera adjusted her diet, monitored her sleep, and refined her routines to ensure optimal conditions for her pregnancy. She continued to study humans, noting how their emotional states, environment, and community support influenced health and well-being. It became increasingly clear that humans possessed qualities her species had dismissed: adaptability, empathy, and resilience that could affect life at its most fundamental level. Elias observed these changes with growing concern and admiration. He noticed her heightened awareness, her quiet focus, and the way she approached every decision with precision. Yet he also sensed something more profound, a connection to life, to the future that transcended science and reason. One evening, as they walked along the cliffside overlooking the colony, Elias finally spoke. "Lysera, I don't fully understand what's happening, but I can see it. You're different, stronger somehow, and something more, are you? He trailed off, searching for words. Lysera paused, looking at the horizon where the suns were setting in brilliant streaks of gold and violet. Yes, she said softly, her voice calm yet filled with quiet awe. Something new has begun. A possibility once denied is now real. He could not have anticipated this outcome, yet he felt an instinctive certainty that it was extraordinary. A child? He asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Lysera inclined her head. Yes, a child, the first of its kind. She did not elaborate, knowing that the revelation itself carried weight beyond words. Elias nodded, understanding the magnitude of the situation without needing further explanation. News of the discovery spread slowly within the colony, first through the medical team, then through trusted human officials. There was awe, disbelief, and cautious hope. Lysera, however, maintained her composure, continuing her routines, observing, and ensuring that every precaution was taken for the child's development. The Tivarn nobles, meanwhile, remained unaware. They continued their schemes, expecting tales of humiliation and failure. They could not imagine that their joke had backfired so spectacularly, that the princess they had dismissed as infertile had achieved what they considered impossible. Lysera began to experience the subtle joys and challenges of pregnancy. Physical sensations, emotional awareness, and the quiet growth of new life became part of her daily experience. She documented everything with meticulous care, noting how human and Tivarn biology intertwined in ways that defied conventional understanding. Elias remained a constant presence, offering support, protection, and companionship. Their bond deepened, forged through shared responsibility and quiet admiration. He did not fully understand the science behind what was happening, but he understood the significance, and he was committed to ensuring Lysera's safety and well-being. One afternoon, as they observed the human children playing in the fields, Lysera reflected on the nature of life. Humans, despite their apparent fragility, exhibited qualities that had allowed them to thrive against impossible odds. Their creativity, courage, and empathy were not weaknesses. They were strengths that could shape the future of entire civilizations. This child, Lysera said quietly to Elias, will carry not only the potential of my people but the resilience of yours. It is a union of possibilities, a bridge between worlds. And it will prove that strength is not only in what one can conquer, but in what one can nurture, protect, and inspire. She continued to participate in daily routines, contribute to problem-solving, and guide decisions with insight that combined human practicality and Tivarn precision. The moment of revelation, the first undeniable signs of pregnancy, remained a quiet secret between her and Elias. It was a shared understanding, a bond that needed no words beyond recognition. They both knew that when the time came to reveal it, the impact would be profound. Lysera also began to notice subtle changes in human behavior toward her. They instinctively respected her presence, perhaps sensing the life within her, even if they could not comprehend its significance. Children were drawn to her gentle demeanor, adults sought her guidance, and even skeptics found themselves influenced by her quiet strength. Elias observed these interactions with pride. Lysera had not only survived among humans, she had thrived. She had adapted, learned, and influenced a species that many in her own empire had dismissed. The humans, in turn, had unknowingly shaped her, providing an environment in which she could challenge assumptions, defy expectations, and achieve the impossible. One evening, as the colony gathered for a festival, Lysera stood on the balcony overlooking the celebration. She watched humans dance, sing, and share laughter, feeling the energy of life around her. It was vibrant, chaotic, and beautiful, a stark contrast to the rigid halls of her palace. Yet within it, she felt a connection deeper than science alone could explain. Elias joined her quietly. "They're remarkable, aren't they?" he said softly. Lysera nodded, her eyes reflecting the glow of the celebration below. "Yes. And soon, one of them, and a part of me, will carry that resilience into the future." And for the first time in her life, Lysera allowed herself a feeling she had never fully experienced. Hope. Lysera had spent months among the humans, learning, observing, and quietly nurturing the life growing within her. The days had passed in a rhythm of study, companionship, and careful experimentation, but the time had come for her to return to the Tivarn dominion. The humans of Arden had become a part of her life, and she felt a deep respect for their courage, ingenuity, and spirit. Yet duty and circumstance demanded she face her own people once more. Commander Elias Kane accompanied her to the starship dock. He had been a steadfast companion, protector, and confidant, though neither had fully spoken of the bond that had formed between them. Elias understood the dangers awaiting them in the Dominion, yet he also recognized the significance of the child growing within her. "You are ready for this," Elias said, his voice steady but filled with concern. "No matter what they expect, remember who you are, remember what you have learned. They sent me as a joke, but I will return with dignity. I will show them the strength they refused to see." The journey through space was quiet, giving Lysera time to reflect. She reviewed her observations, her notes, and the careful records she had kept of her pregnancy. Every precaution had been taken, every detail considered. The child she carried represented more than life. It was a symbol of possibility, bridging two species, two worlds, and countless futures. Upon arrival at the Dominion, the palace was a glittering vision of alien grandeur. Crystal spires reached into the sky, and the halls echoed with the footsteps of nobles and attendants. Whispers had already begun to circulate, rumors of Lysera's return and the reasons behind her exile. The nobles believed they were poised for ridicule and entertainment, fully expecting her to arrive humiliated and broken. Lysera stepped from the starship, her posture graceful and assured. She wore the ceremonial garb of the Dominion, yet her demeanor carried a subtle confidence that made the nobles uneasy. Commander Kane remained at her side, silent but vigilant, a reminder that she was not alone in this world of expectation and scrutiny. The council chamber awaited her, a vast hall adorned with banners, statues, and intricate mosaics that celebrated the history of the Tivarn Empire. The nobles gathered, their expressions a mix of amusement, skepticism, and curiosity. They had planned to mock her to celebrate her supposed failure, yet they were met with something unexpected. A princess who had returned not in shame, but in quiet power. "Princess Lysera," Lord Cranny said, stepping forward with a smirk, "we eagerly await your tales from the human colonies. Surely your time among them has been enlightening." "Indeed, Lord Crannies, my time has been enlightening, as you suggest. I have observed, learned, and reflected, and I have discovered truths that challenge our assumptions. They are resilient, intelligent, and capable of great empathy. They adapt, they survive, and they nurture life in ways we have overlooked. I have spent months among them, studying, observing, and engaging with their society, and through this experience I have discovered something extraordinary." The nobles leaned forward, sensing that her words carried weight beyond their understanding. Lysera raised her hands slightly, a gesture both delicate and commanding. "I am pregnant. The child I carry is a union of human resilience and Tivarn potential. It is a living testament to what can occur when assumptions are challenged and possibilities are embraced." The nobles were stunned. Their expectations of failure had been shattered, replaced by disbelief and awe. The princess, whom they had sent as a joke, had returned carrying the impossible. Lord Cranny stepped forward, his expression a mixture of anger and incredulity. "This is impossible. You were declared infertile. The laws of biology, of science, Yet life finds a way where intellect alone could not. This child represents more than my own existence. It embodies the strength, ingenuity, and compassion of humans, qualities we have overlooked, dismissed, or undervalued. And it demonstrates that true power is not always in domination, hierarchy, or authority. It lies in adaptability, courage, and the willingness to embrace the unexpected." Even the most skeptical nobles could not deny the truth in her words. The princess had returned with undeniable proof that their assumptions had been flawed. Elias stepped forward, his presence a silent support for Lysera. He spoke carefully, respectfully, and firmly. "I have observed this princess among humans, and I can attest to her integrity, intelligence, and courage. The child she carries is a living testament to what can happen when species work together and respect each other's strengths." Lysera did not gloat, nor did she demand recognition. Her approach was calm, reasoned, and undeniable. She presented her observations, shared her findings, and allowed the evidence to speak for itself. In doing so, she reshaped the narrative from humiliation to enlightenment. Lord Crannies, red-faced and seething, attempted one final insult. "This is a trick, some human deception." "This cannot be." The princess had returned stronger, wiser, and carrying life. A life that symbolized unity, resilience, and the unexpected power of humans. In the following days, Lysera's influence grew. The Tivarn Empire, long rigid and hierarchical, began to acknowledge the lessons she had brought from Arden. Discussions of human potential, adaptability, and collaboration became more common. Nobles who had once mocked her now approached her with cautious respect. The joke had transformed into a revolution of understanding. Lysera herself focused on preparation and care. Her pregnancy advanced with careful attention to health, nutrition, and emotional balance. The life she nurtured was a constant reminder of possibility and hope, a symbol that even the most rigid assumptions could be challenged and overturned. Elias remained her steadfast companion, offering protection, guidance, and unwavering support. Their bond, built through shared experiences and quiet understanding, became a source of strength for both. Together, they navigated the complex dynamics of the Tivarn court, ensuring that Lysera's message of unity and respect was heard and understood. One evening, as the sun set over the crystalline spires of the palace, Lysera stood on her balcony, gazing at the horizon. She thought of Arden, of the humans who had welcomed her, and of the life growing within her. The Tivarn Dominion had expected humiliation, yet she had returned with dignity, strength, and truth. She smiled faintly, a quiet confidence radiating from her. The joke had not defeated her. It had revealed a deeper lesson, that strength is not always found in authority, wealth, or tradition, but in adaptability, courage, and the willingness to embrace what others cannot see. And as she placed a hand gently on her abdomen, feeling the life within, she understood something profound. The future of the Tivarn Empire, and perhaps the galaxy itself, was not written by those who underestimated, mocked, or dismissed. It was written by those who dared to learn, to adapt, and to embrace the unexpected. Lysera turned to Elias, her eyes shining with quiet determination. "This child," she said softly, "will change everything. Not just for me, not just for humans, but for everyone who believed the impossible was impossible. Whatever comes, we will protect it, and we will ensure that the future is worthy of this life." She had turned it into a triumph that no one could deny, and in doing so, she had begun to reshape the destiny of her empire. The palace, once a place of whispers and ridicule, now became a stage for transformation. Lysera's quiet strength, her intelligence, and the life she carried became symbols of hope, possibility, and the extraordinary potential of humans. The princess had returned as more than a joke. She had returned as a force that could not be ignored, a bridge between worlds, and a herald of a new era. And in that quiet, powerful moment, Lysera knew that the child she carried was not just her own legacy. It was the beginning of something far greater than anyone had imagined. Lysera's final months passed under careful watch, not only from physicians, but from an entire empire that had been forced to reconsider everything it believed. The palace that once whispered behind her back now moved quietly around her, cautious and attentive. Every step she took echoed with meaning. She was no longer the subject of a cruel joke. She had become a symbol of change. The Tivarn physicians worked alongside human doctors brought from Arden. At first, there had been resistance. Tivarn science was proud and rigid, while human methods were flexible and adaptive. Yet as days passed, cooperation replaced tension. Human doctors observed, adjusted, and learned, while Tivarn experts provided advanced tools and deep biological knowledge. Together, they formed something new, something stronger than either approach alone. Lysera watched this cooperation with quiet satisfaction. This was exactly what she had hoped for, not dominance, not humiliation, but understanding. Elias remained close, a constant presence. He stood beside her during council meetings, medical briefings, and quiet walks through the palace gardens. Though he carried no royal title, many nobles now treated him with respect. They had seen his loyalty, his calm strength, and his unwavering support of Lysera. Humans, once dismissed as insignificant, were now impossible to ignore. As the birth drew closer, tension spread through the Dominion. No hybrid child had ever existed. Some feared instability, others feared change, but many, especially the younger generation, felt hope. If life could exist where science said it could not, then perhaps the empire itself could evolve. Lysera spent long evenings reflecting. She thought of Arden, the laughter, the shared meals, the simple courage of humans who faced danger with determination rather than pride. She remembered children playing in the fields, engineers repairing broken machines with creativity instead of complaint, and doctors who treated life as something precious, not merely a process. She understood now why humans endured. They did not rely on perfection. They relied on persistence. When the time came, it came quietly. There was no dramatic announcement, no grand ceremony. Just a calm morning, filtered light passing through crystal windows, and a sense of readiness that settled over Lysera like steady breath. She was taken to the medical wing where both human and T-Varn teams waited. Elias stayed close, his expression focused but gentle. He did not speak much. He did not need to. The process was difficult, unfamiliar to both sciences. There were moments of uncertainty, moments when ancient T-Varn technology failed and human adaptability filled the gap. Human doctors adjusted in real time, responding to changes rather than forcing outcomes. T-Varn systems stabilized what human tools could not. Hours passed. Then finally life announced itself. The child's first sound was soft but unmistakably alive. The room fell silent. Physicians stared in disbelief. Scanners confirmed what eyes already saw. The child was healthy, stable, perfectly balanced between two species that were never meant to meet in this way. Lysera felt a wave of emotion she had never known, not triumph, not victory, something deeper, purpose. Elias stood frozen for a moment before stepping closer. When Lysera looked at him, there were no words, only understanding. The impossible had become real. News spread across the Dominion within hours. Screens lit up in cities, stations, and distant colonies. The image of the child, small, calm, alive, reached every corner of the empire. Silence followed, then debate, then acceptance. The nobles who once laughed could say nothing. The laws of nature had spoken more clearly than any argument. The child was proof that assumptions were not truth and that rigidity was not strength. The council convened in emergency session. This time, Lysera was not summoned. She was invited. She entered the chamber holding the child, her posture calm, her presence commanding without force. Elias walked beside her. "This child," Lysera said simply, "exists because two species chose understanding over arrogance. Humans did not force what was impossible. They adapted. They observed. They cared. This child will not be hidden," she continued. "They will not be weaponized or studied like an object. They will be raised with values from both worlds, discipline and empathy, knowledge and curiosity." Joint research centers were formed. T-Varn engineers began studying human problem-solving methods. Human scientists gained access to advanced technology, but not as subordinates. As partners, Lysera watched these changes with quiet pride. She did not rule through fear. She inspired through example. The child grew quickly, displaying calm awareness and strong health. Observers noted something remarkable, not superior intelligence or physical dominance, but balance. A steady curiosity, a calm resilience. Humans recognized it immediately. "That's human," one doctor said softly. "That calm in chaos." History would remember them not as villains, but as small minds who failed to see beyond tradition. Lysera often stood on the palace balcony, the child resting peacefully in her arms, watching the stars. Elias would join her, silent and steady. "They underestimated you," he said once. "They underestimated humans," she replied. Time passed. The child became a symbol across the galaxy. Not of conquest, not of dominance, but of cooperation. Other species took notice. Some approached cautiously, others openly. They had seen empires fall through arrogance. They had never seen one evolve through humility. Lysera ensured that her child was never placed above others, but never hidden either. They attended human settlements. They observed T-Varn councils. They learned both patience and curiosity, and everywhere they went the same truth became clear. Humans were not weak. They were adaptable. They were resilient. They changed the rules not by breaking them, but by surviving long enough to rewrite them. Years later, historians would look back on the moment the T-Varn nobles sent an infertile princess to a human as a joke. They would mark it as the turning point, not because of revenge, not because of humiliation, but because humans once again had done what they always did best. They endured, they adapted, and they quietly proved the universe wrong.